I've been playing games for over 2 decades now. I've had countless companions, sidekicks, and party members by my side. But Charles Smith from Red Dead Redemption 2 hits differently. Not in some flashy, over-the-top way that most game characters try to grab your attention. Charles earned my respect the quiet way, through actions, consistency, and being the kind of person you'd actually want watching your back in real life. The weird thing is, most people sleep on Charles. They talk about Arthur's redemption arc, Dutch's manipulation, even Micah's villainy. But Charles, he's just there, reliable, steady. And that's exactly what makes him the best damn sidekick I've ever had in a video game. From the moment you meet Charles in the snowy mountains, something about him feels different. While everyone else is complaining about the cold, arguing about the failed Blackwater job, or generally being dramatic, Charles is just handling business. Hunting. Teaching Arthur how to use a bow. Getting stuff done without making a big show of it. I remember that early hunting mission where he's showing Arthur the ropes with the bow. Most video game tutorials feel like chores, right? But Charles makes it feel natural. He's not lecturing you or showing off. He is just sharing knowledge because it's useful. Animals don't like to be tracked when they're wounded, he says. Simple, practical, no wasted words. That's when I realized Charles doesn't talk just to hear himself speak. Every word has purpose. In a gang full of people who love the sound of their own voices, Dutch with his speeches, Micah with his manipulation, even Arthur with his constant journaling, Charles was the only man who speaks when he has something worth saying. What really got to me about Charles is that he has this internal moral compass that doesn't shift based on convenience. Most characters in Red Dead 2 have flexible morality. They'll do the right thing when it's easy, but when the situation becomes real hard, then survival trumps everything. Not Charles. Remember that mission, A Short Walk in a Pretty Town, where you're scouting with Arthur? You come across that German family hiding under their wagon, terrified, because raiders took the father. Arthur's first instinct is like it's basically, not our problem, we need this land. But Charles, without hesitation, we should help them. This is exactly what Dunbar describes as moral reciprocity in action. Real friends don't just support you, they make you better. Dunbar explains that genuine friendships involve what he calls moral elevation. Friends inspire each other to act according to higher principles, not just immediate self-interest. Arthur pushes back, talking about how they're wanted men, how they can't afford to get sidetracked. And Charles just looks at him and says something that stuck with me. "Come on, Arthur, that's not how you are." That line hit me like a truck, because Charles saw something in Arthur that Arthur couldn't see in himself. This is pure Dunbar psychology. Real friends hold up a mirror that reflects not just who we are, but who we're capable of becoming. The crazy part? Arthur admits this in his journal later. He writes about how Charles is a better man than him, how Charles doesn't have to think to be good, it just comes naturally. That's the mark of true character development, when other characters notice and grow because of your influence. Dunbar calls this social modeling. We naturally emulate the behavior of people we respect and trust. If you've ever read Friends, Understanding the Power of Our Most Important Relationships by Robin Dunbar, and if you haven't, it's this fascinating book that breaks down the psychology and biology behind what makes real friendships work. Charles Smith is basically a masterclass in everything Dunbar talks about. Dunbar, who's famous for discovering Dunbar's number, the limit to how many stable relationships humans can maintain, explains that genuine friendship isn't just about liking someone. It's built on specific psychology, trust building through repeated positive interactions, having each other's back, emotional connections, and what he calls grooming behaviors, the small acts of care that strengthen social bonds. Charles demonstrates every single one of these mechanisms perfectly. First, there's what Dunbar calls reciprocal altruism, the foundation of all lasting friendships. Real friends help each other without keeping a score. Charles saves Arthur's life multiple times throughout the game, but he never throws it in Arthur's face or uses it for leverage. When Arthur helps Charles with the Wapiti situation, it's not because Charles demanded it, it's because that's how genuine friendship works. Dunbar also talks about costly signaling, the idea that we prove our friendship through actions that require genuine sacrifice. Anyone can say they're your friend when it's convenient. Real friends show up when it costs them something. Charles does this constantly. When he stays behind to help the Wapiti tribe relocate, he's giving up his own safety and comfort. When he chooses to help that German family instead of focusing on the gang's immediate needs, he's prioritizing moral action over practical benefit. If you are enjoying the video and have started a liking towards Charles, you should subscribe to the channel. Charles officially leads the gang for like 2 missions when Dutch and Arthur are stranded on Guarma. Watch how everyone responds to him during that time. No speeches, no grand gestures. He just tells people what needs to be done, and they do it. This is what Dunbar would call natural leadership. Unlike manipulative leadership that relies on fear or ego clash, Charles's authority comes from what Dunbar describes as social intelligence. The ability to understand and respond to group dynamics in ways that benefit everyone. Compare that to Dutch, who needs to give a philosophical essay or course every time he wants someone to rob a stagecoach. Or Micah, who has to manipulate and make people follow him. Charles just leads. People trust him because he's demonstrated what Dunbar calls behavioral consistency. His actions match his words over time. When Sadie suggests that they go after the O'Driscolls who have Jack, it's Charles who keeps everyone focused and organized. When they need to move camp, Charles has already scouted the perfect location. When Dutch comes back and wants to know what happened, Charles gives him the facts without trying to make himself look heroic. That's real leadership, not the charismatic kind that gets you followers, the quiet, competent kind that gets results. What makes Charles even more compelling is his backstory. Half Native American, half African American, growing up in the 1800s. Think about what that means for a second. He's caught between 2 worlds that the civilized society of the time wanted to destroy. His mother was taken by soldiers when he was young, just disappeared one day, never seen again. His father became an alcoholic and couldn't handle the trauma. Charles was on his own by 13, surviving in a world that saw him as less than human for many reasons. But here's the thing. Charles doesn't wear his trauma like a badge. He doesn't use it to justify bad behavior or ask for sympathy. He just carries it quietly and uses his pain to recognize suffering in others. When he sees that German family in trouble, he probably sees his own family's story. When he helps the Wapiti tribe later in the game, he's fighting for the heritage he never got to fully experience. Most characters would use this backstory for all the dramatic moments they could get. Charles just lets it inform his actions without making a show of it. That takes incredible strength. The whole Wapiti storyline in Chapter 6 is where Charles really shines, and it's where I realized why he'd been so reserved with the gang all along. He wasn't holding back because he didn't care. He was holding back because he hadn't found his people yet. Watch how different Charles becomes when he's working with Eagle Flies and Rains Fall. Suddenly he's more talkative, more invested, taking charge of situations. He's found something worth fighting for beyond just survival. The mission where Charles asks Arthur to come to the peace meeting is huge for understanding his character. "It ain't your business, brother," Arthur says, and Charles responds, "No, I know, but it is mine. Do it for me, Charles. I've saved your life. Do it for me." That's the first time in the entire game Charles asks for something personal. Not for the gang's benefit, not for practical reasons, because this matters to him in a way nothing else has, and Arthur goes. Not because he has to, but because Charles has earned that loyalty through dozens of small acts of friendship and sacrifice. Charles is the best wingman in gaming history, and I'll fight anyone who disagrees. He's got Arthur's back in ways that go beyond just shooting bad guys. When Arthur is doubting himself, Charles believes in him. When Arthur is being too harsh on himself, Charles reminds him of his good qualities. When Arthur needs someone to trust completely, Charles is there without question. That mission, My Last Boy, where they're riding to save Eagle Flies from the oil refinery, Arthur says he's better off going alone, and Charles just says, "We're riding with you." No argument, no discussion of odds or tactics, just, "We're with you." The music swells. You've got this small group of people who genuinely care about each other riding into hard situations, and Charles is right there beside Arthur. Not because he has to be, but because that's what friends do. In a game full of men trying to prove how tough they are through violence and show off, Charles shows a different kind of strength. He's incredibly capable in a fight. Probably the best pure gunfighter in the gang after Arthur. Violence is a tool for him, not an identity. Charles shows emotion without shame. When Eagle Flies dies, Charles grieves openly. When he talks about his mother, you can hear the pain in his voice. When he's worried about Arthur's health, he doesn't hide behind jokes. He just expresses genuine concern. This is what healthy masculinity looks like. Strong enough to be gentle, confident enough to be vulnerable, secure enough to put other people's needs first without losing yourself. Charles doesn't need to prove anything to anyone. He just is who he is. Charles' character is a best example of how we should be in our life, and if he inspires you with his genuinity, loyalty, and masculinity, please consider subscribing to the channel. Here's what really sets Charles apart from other video game companions. He's the kind of person you'd actually want as a friend in real life. He's reliable, honest, and genuinely cares about the people in his life. According to Dunbar's research, real friendship is built on what he calls the friendship equation: frequency of communication, emotional connection, intimacy levels, and support. Charles hits every single element perfectly. Think about your real friends, the ones you actually call when something goes wrong. They're probably more like Charles than like any other character in that game. They show up when they say they will, they listen without judgment. They tell you the truth even when it's not what you want to hear. They've got your back without expecting anything in return. Dunbar explains that genuine friends engage in what he calls social grooming, small, consistent acts of care that strengthen bonds over time. Charles does all of that for Arthur throughout the game. When Arthur is sick and everyone else is either in denial or making it about themselves, Charles just quietly takes care of what needs to be done. When Arthur needs support in all ways, Charles is always there for him. What's even more impressive is how Charles demonstrates what Dunbar calls friendship maintenance. Most people let friendships fade through neglect or conflict. Charles actively works to maintain his relationships through what Dunbar describes as emotional investment. He pays attention to Arthur's moods, remembers what matters to him, and consistently shows up in ways that matter. The end of Charles's story in the main game absolutely destroyed me. After Eagleflies dies and the Wapiti situation is resolved, Charles tells Arthur he's staying to help the tribe relocate to Canada. Arthur understands. Of course he does, because Charles has finally found where he belongs. "I'll stay and help them," Charles says. "I'll stay too," Arthur offers. "No, my friend. You have others who need you. Good people." That exchange is perfect. Charles recognizes that Arthur has his own responsibilities, his own people to protect. He's not asking Arthur to abandon his family for his cause. He's making a personal choice to follow his own path. The fact that Charles isn't there for Arthur's final stand on the mountain makes it even more heartbreaking. These two men who became genuine friends, who saved each other's lives multiple times, who trusted each other completely, and Charles doesn't get to be there at the end, because he's doing what he needs to do for his own people. It's realistic in the most painful way. Sometimes good people have to make hard choices that separate them from the people they care about. Playing Red Dead 2 in today's world, Charles feels more relevant than ever. In an era of enhancing social image of ourselves and no genuinity, Charles shows what real integrity looks like. He doesn't post about his values, he lives them. He doesn't make grand speeches about justice or equality. He just treats people with respect, regardless of their background. He doesn't lecture people about their moral failings. He leads by example and lets people come to their own conclusions. Charles also shows how to handle trauma and discrimination without letting it define you or excuse bad behavior. He's faced incredible hardship. Still, he chooses to respond with strength and compassion rather than bitterness or violence. In a world that often rewards the loudest voices and the most dramatic gestures, Charles reminds us that quiet competence and consistent character are more valuable than show-offs. Later, Charles has moved on with his life. He's not hanging around trying to relive past glory or nurse old wounds. He helped John build his house, settled his debt with Micah, and then went north to find his own peace. That's growth. That's someone who understands that life moves forward, and you have to move with it. He honors his friendships without being trapped by them. He learns from his experiences without being defined by them. Most video game characters are designed to be memorable through conflict and drama. Charles is memorable because he represents something we don't see enough of in games or in life: a genuinely good person who stays good even when it's difficult. Charles Smith isn't flashy. He's not going to be on the cover of magazines or starring in his own spin-off, though he should be. He's just a well-written, perfectly acted character who does his job and treats people right. Charles is refreshingly straightforward. He's a good man trying to do right by the people he cares about. That's not simple. That's actually the hardest thing in the world to do, consistently. Charles earned my respect the way real people do, through small actions repeated over time, through being present when it mattered, through proving that his word meant something. He's the sidekick I never knew I needed, and the standard I now hold all video game companions to. If you've got someone in your life like Charles Smith, someone who's got your back without making a big deal about it, who challenges you to be better without judging you for your flaws, who shows up when they say they will, hold on to them. They're rarer than you think. If you admire Charles after watching this, like and subscribe, because we will be bringing up More genuine, loyal, and best sidekick characters, just like Charles, also share this to someone who should watch this. Charles Smith isn't just the best sidekick in gaming. He's a reminder of what friendship actually looks like when it's real.